All right, so I'll start again. This is CSC 343, client-side scripting. So we'll be doing mainly JavaScript. We'll learn we'll do sort of like a survey of HTML. We'll handle that mainly by homeworks, and we will do some styling, some CSS. I won't teach you styling so much as the syntax of styling. If you want to learn actually how to style, then probably take a digital art course. And our focus will be on JavaScript. We'll start sort of maybe a third of the course. We will do just the plain old language of JavaScript, hopefully sort of a more sophisticated and more modern version than you might have learned in 230. Then we will, in sort of the second third of the course, we'll pick up a library, probably React. That's what I've done before. And then in the third third, different library, and that will be the Vue library. Okay. I'm Tom Blum, and a lot of students just call me Blum, which is fine, sort of nickname of sorts. If you need to give me a title, professor or doctor, either one, fine. I'm in Holroyd 133. For most of you, you might understand that I'm next to Redmond. That's my phone. Email is my preferred means of communication. But if you want to see if I'm in my office, say you wanted to get into Holroyd and it's Sunday and it's locked, then you might want to call. Or if you had something to discuss and you wanted to do it in person, you might see if I'm in my office, but normally email. This is my website. I used to run my course from my website. I don't anymore. I use Canvas because they make me. Also because I can't post things if I'm not on campus to my website. They up the security. But there is a previous version of this course there. So if you want a good idea of what's coming, you can look there. The office is 123 and the office number is 1130 if you need to be in contact with the chair or the administrative assistant for any reason. I have to put down official office hours to satisfy the administration. So these are what I came up with. Usually I am around a lot, usually come in the mornings, like by 9 usually, and I'm usually here till around 5 or so. A lot of times sometimes I'm here in the evening, and sometimes on the weekend. So I'm around a lot, so don't feel any reason that you have to restrict yourself to these times. If you want to just talk to me about a situation, then we can do that in my office, 133. If we're going over code, then I probably want us both looking at the same computer. So probably go over to Holroyd 124, and we can also work by Zoom. If you want to have a Zoom meeting and we are going to talk about code, if you're saying mine's not working and can you help me with it, then you should be on a computer, and I will expect you to share your screen and show me your code, and we'll sort of step through it. But so if you want to go over code, don't get on the Zoom meeting on your phone. Okay, anything else? Email. Okay, let me rattle on about email for a while. I have students. I'm kind of like I moved over to Canvas, but I'm still a Canvas minimalist. I do as little as they'll let me do on Canvas. I post modules there. Some things are demos and some things are for you to do. If it's labeled homework, it's for you to do. If it's labeled lab, it's for you to do. Otherwise, typically it will be a demo of something that you would use to do the lab or to do the homework, probably to do the lab. You will send me your files when you complete a lab. You'll send me your files. You'll send them to me by email. If you separate, we can work. We're going to be making web pages with JavaScript in them. If you should probably just zip everything. That's probably the best way to work. The email system, if you have a bare, if you have JavaScript code separated into a .js file, the email system is probably definitely not going to like that. If the JavaScript is in HTML, it might not complain as much, but it's definitely going to complain if you have a separate .js file. So zip everything up and send it to me. Give your emails a subject. Try to give them different subjects. So like, let me know it's lab 3 or lab 4, something like that. If you send me a bunch of emails all with the same subject, then it gets sometimes collapsed into a conversation. I grade chronologically. So as things come in, I grade them. Some people have already turned in assignments for this class. Nothing. I mean, the first thing that I'll give today is not due until next week. So don't worry if you're behind. It's just I posted stuff up on Canvas and some people went ahead and did it, which is fine by me. But I grade chronologically. So as the stuff comes in, I grade it. When I grade it, I will send an email back to you with a screen capture of my spreadsheet, of your line in my spreadsheet, not the entire spreadsheet. So if you are not getting anything from me, then I might not be getting your emails. So look for responses from me. I mean, don't send me and then knock on my door half an hour later wondering why you haven't gotten a response. I don't grade that quickly. But if you've sent something and a few days have gone by and you haven't heard, I might have missed it. I usually show you my entire spreadsheet that I have so far. So if I missed anything and all of a sudden you see a hole, that may mean I missed something. And so then you should sort of find the email and sort of forward it again to me, sort of saying, I think you might have missed this. What else? Okay, well, that's enough about email. I'll probably say more later. Okay, so what's in this class? It is a sort of web development client-side course. So that means that client-side means that the code that we will write will be run on the, typically run on the web page that the user, so the user will be looking at a web page in a browser and on a computer, and that computer's CPU will be being used to execute the code. I will tend to work in the Visual Studio Code, not Visual Studio. This is not like 230, the Visual Studio Code. I'll tend to work in the Visual Studio Code environment, and there are times for security reasons when we're working with, say, data files that the browsers will want to think that the page is coming from a server. So even though it's a client-side course and we're writing JavaScript, which is executed on the client side, when we're working with data files, we need to trick the system into thinking that things come from a server. So within Visual Studio Code, we will work with something called Live Server, which is just an extension, easy to grab. So it's not like setting up a full server. It's not, it's not like an IT course where setting up the server takes a lot of time. You have an extension. You add an extension to your Visual Studio Code environment. So that's, I don't know, 2 minutes. And then if you open the file properly, it's opened up in the live server. It's usually nothing to it. I had one situation last year, I guess maybe a year and a half, last time I taught this course. Visual Studio Code is fairly simple and nice, except of course when it's not. So it has this JSON file with all its settings in there, and every once in a while it goes haywire, and then you've got to track down weird settings in the file. So, you know, what did I have? 20 some students the last time around, and one had issues with the live server, and we worked through it. But so it's usually easy. Every once in a while it's not. We are going to be coding, and it's assumed that you've had some coding before. So either 230 or 280 or some equivalent. I won't, it's easier if you've seen JavaScript before, but it's more important just that you've seen coding before. So the prerequisite is about coding more than specifically JavaScript. Although, as taught here at LaSalle, 230 tends to be in JavaScript, and that's what we're learning. So it might be a little bit easier if you had JavaScript before, but really all you need is have had programming. All the stuff they make me say on the syllabus. It's section 31. It's 3 credits. We meet Mondays and Wednesdays at 3:30. Yesterday was the first day of classes this spring. If you need to make a change in your schedule, the add drop period goes until Monday. If you're just taking this course for the fun of it, if you're taking it for your major or your dual major or your minor, but if you're just taking it for fun as an extra thing, then you might be able to set it up as you're taking it pass-fail. There are various computer science career thingies going on. Usually you can get information on these from Professor McCooey. She's very involved in that. So there was something on the 17th that she told me about, something on March 5th. Mid-semester grades for freshmen, sophomores, and new transfers. That's on March 9th. Every once in a while, I guess I can have, I think I do have a freshman. And sometimes I get a sophomore and sometimes I get a new transfer. So it's, if I have like 3 people I have to produce grades for, then I'll just produce those 3 grades. And I probably won't post mid-semester grades otherwise. But if you don't know where you stand, then we can have a conversation. It's usually like involved, and I'll show you something on a spreadsheet, and I'll say, if you do this, but if you do that. So I'd rather have, if you're not clear about where your standing is, then I'd rather have that conversation than just put one simple little letter down. That's not a lot of information. Just not very meaningful, frankly, but you know, they want a mid-semester grade for certain people, so I give it to them. But if I'd rather have, if you want information about how you're doing in the course, and you really don't know based on, you know, your test grades and lab grades and what have you, set up a Zoom meeting, we'll talk, or come to my office, we'll talk. Spring break is the 14th through the 18th. There's another career thing, a job fair of some format on the 31st. If you didn't add drop, if you didn't drop me this week, but need to get away from me later on in the semester, that's by April 1st, if you want to withdraw from the course. The Easter holidays, the 15th through the 18th. Classes end on the 6th. The finals week is the 9th through the 12th. Graduation for seniors is the 14th. but their grades aren't due until the 17th. And then the final grades for everybody else are due on the 18th. All right, what else? I don't use a book. I post lots of examples, and I'll tell you where I got things. And basically, you just sort of Google things. This is the language, and like all the web pages are written in. So there are tons and tons of examples. I'm always on Stack Overflow. I'm always on YouTube. I like the W3 schools. So there are lots of places to get information. And so we don't need no stinking books. All right. Here are some places you can get things. There are many, many more. What are we going to be able to do after this course? You should be able to make a web page that's dynamic and interactive. By dynamic, I'll usually mean that you can add features to the page from code. So there'll be a design part, and as we move through the course, more and more of the design won't have everything that's on the page there in design, and we will add it through code. And interactive will mean that the user's interacting with so dynamic is us as a coder putting things on the page, and interactive, I mean a user of the page doing stuff. So I'm not going to tell you what a good style is. You need somebody who understands style, but I will tell you some of the syntax of style. I will show you, like, this is how CSS works. So we're going to worry about the user experience, not in detail. We're not going to study the user experience. That can be a full-on course, but we're going to care about, if the user responding to the user in a reasonable way. If the user does this, then we should, if they forget something, we should remind them. If we shouldn't make them click a million buttons, we shouldn't make it hard on the user to do whatever it is we want to do. We should be able to work. This is where the live server came in. When you work with external files, external data files, that is where the browsers have this security. So either we can turn off the security of the browser, which I don't think is that good of an idea. And instead, we're going to opt for using the live server. So then we'll pretend that our page is being delivered by a server, and it can read these external data files of JSON and XML. And anybody who knows me in previous courses will know that, I love JSON files. So when we get to that, expect to see a lot of it. We're not going to do a lot on security and validation, but some. We're going to learn some libraries like React or Vue. We're going to worry a little bit about usability and accessibility. Again, that can be a full-on course, but we're just going to do some of it. And we want to be sort of like responsive and sort of like move things around on the page depending on the size of the page and things like that. Some of these things will just be sort of seen in a homework, but the coding part will be sort of full on our main focus. Okay, anything else? One of my goals, and it's not stated here, is to expand the skill region of your resume. So I'm hoping by the end of the course that you'll be comfortable saying HTML, CSS, JavaScript, JSON, XML, React, Vue. I hope you'll be comfortable enough to put, to add to this list of things that that you know. So everything, we don't do, there'll be a lot of JavaScript. That'll be a fair amount of depth in JavaScript, but it's also, I tend to go for breadth. So I want you to sort of see a lot of things and have a lot of words to add to your resume. There'll be, every day will be a lab. Every day that's not a test will be a lab. So a typical, this is not the typical day. I rattle on about the syllabus for too long because they make me. But a typical day, I will talk, of the 75 minutes, I will talk for 30 to 45 minutes, and then I will give you time to work on a lab. So that is, and every day is a lab. I give a lot of assignments. If you do those assignments, you usually do pretty well. So that is 30% of your grade. The homework. So I will give, especially in the beginning part of the course, I usually will give something, a homework, and I will give an HTML aspect, a CSS aspect, and a JavaScript aspect to the homework. And that will be worth 15%. I'm going to give 2 tests and a final, so they're all worth 15%. Typically, to save you guys from me trying to squeeze too much into one test, I often make these tests sort of like 2-day tests. So that prevents me from trying to squeeze too much into one day. And then there's a project, which is basically, I would say, the equivalent of maybe 2 labs. I'll just have, toward the end, I'll have some long list of things. Your project should have this, that, and the other thing. And if you have those things and I list, then your project grade will be good. So if you're turning in all your labs and homework, if it's, I typically open them up and run them and take a peek at the code. And if it does, for the most part, what it's supposed to do, and I'm not going to look for the one little tiny case that you forgot, is not an algorithm. It's not an algorithm course. I'm not looking for the one case that you forgot that your page doesn't do what it's supposed to do. I'm going to open up the page. If it for the more or less does what it's supposed to do most of the time, then you're going to get 100. So this grade, if you're keeping up and doing your work, 45% of your grade should be 100. Then there's another 45% of your grade, which is a test. So if you're a good coder, you'll do well on the tests. But if you're not a good coder or a good test taker, then you might struggle here. But this 100, this 45% of your grade, that is 100, should pull you up. And projects are sort of in between. It's rare that somebody would get 100. If somebody's like very careful and, I don't know, I'll even say super anal or attentive, then they might get 100 on the project. But usually it's high 80s, low 90s if you sort of pay attention more or less to the list of things I asked for and do them. And if you do them relatively satisfactory, you'll get most of the points. But 100 is rare. But if you give me a project, it's usually a decent grade, high 80s into the low 90s. So this part of the grade should be 100 if you do what you're supposed to do. This part of the grade, if you do what you're supposed to do, is probably low 90s. And then this part of the grade determines your final grade. Or if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, that will determine your grade. And that happens a lot. Grading wise, I am easy, but I give a lot of work. Again, I tell you, every day is a lab. So if you're lazy and not doing your work and refuse to ask questions, then you sort of, fall behind and start accumulating late penalties, and that's where people end up with sometimes low grades for me. I grade with pluses and minuses. I take attendance. I put here that attendance matters, but it's more of like an ass covering move. I expect you to come. I take attendance. This is your main place to get your questions answered. But if you're missing, a week or two, family stuff, other projects, it's not going to affect your grade. I say that it can affect your grade, and that is for the people who have lots of questions for me, but don't want to come to class. So I'm expecting you to come to class, but if you're away for a little bit, it's not going to affect your grade. But if you're away a lot and not getting and asking all your questions outside of class, that's going to affect your grade. If you're not asking the questions, getting answers to your questions, that's also going to affect your grade just by the fact that you're not going to do well on the tests and your labs are going to be late. The sort of nominal, official, more nominal date is that everything is due a week after it's assigned. So today I am assigning the first homework in the first lab, and so I will make them due next Wednesday. The due dates are mostly for you to keep pace. And I don't apply a late penalty. So those labs and homeworks are still eligible for 100 for full credit if I get them before the test that I say is covered by them. So if we do 8 labs and then I decide to have a test, then if those labs if I get them by the day of the first test, then they're still eligible for full credit. You won't get, if you want feedback from me, you need to do them, when they're, you need to submit them when they're due to get feedback from me. If you sort of dump 5 labs on me the night before the test, then I can't get you feedback in time for it to help you on the test. The tests are open, so you can use all your labs on the test. And so I never expect you to code anything completely from scratch. So it's usually copy and paste. If you are not working in that way, if you are if I often, maybe about half the time, probably more than half the time, I give a head start. Sometimes I will say, I don't give you any file, and I say just start writing code. And then even then you can copy stuff from other files. You're always allowed to do that. But there are times when I'm going to give you a file when maybe there's a somewhat tricky design, and I don't want, this is not a design course, so I don't want you to worry about the design. I want you to focus on the JavaScript. So I might give you a design. And I have people who don't pay attention on the tests and go from scratch. So always turn your stuff in, turn it in and get feedback, get it fixed, and then you can use it on the test. So you want to have it ready so that you know what you're doing on the test. You can use the files on the test. If you miss a test, then we'll probably have a makeup. If you miss 2 tests, I probably will do something else that's more severe. But if you just miss 1 test, I'll probably give you a makeup. Sometimes they're harder. I won't sort of target you and say, I don't like you, I'm going to give you a harder test. but just, my good idea is usually taken up by the first test, the original test. And so it might be a little, not as nice a test design the second time around if you're getting a makeup. And also just when everybody's taking a test in the room, then if something is unclear, I will make an announcement. If it's just you taking the test, it won't be clear to me that, maybe I made something sound harder than it was or something. So you won't get those announcements if you're taking it by yourself. So it's just in general a little harder if you're taking it on your own later. The tests are cumulative. It's all JavaScript, but it focuses on the more recent material. So you can't forget, when we get to React, you're not allowed to forget JavaScript. React is just a kind of JavaScript. But when we get to Vue, you won't be doing React. So the focus will be on the new material, but you'll never be able to forget how to loop. Speaking of that, I will often show you many ways how to loop, for instance, and you can sort of use whatever version you want. There will be times when I say I want an object. If I specify something, then I want that thing. So if I say I want you to have a class and an object of that class, then you must have it. But other times, if it's if you just have to loop over something along the way, and there are at least 3 ways to loop over an array, whichever way you do it is typically fine. If it's unclear, that if you don't know if you would lose points or not lose points, then ask. It will drive me absolutely nuts if you write tons and tons of ifs. So there are different ways to loop. They're all legitimate ways to loop. Some of them are older, some of them are newer. But if instead of properly working with a loop over an array, if you just write me, 20 ifs, then I'll get pissed off, and then I may take off some points because it's just you being stubborn and refusing to learn how to code. And this is a coding course. It's not an algorithm course, but it is a coding course. Okay, here's my grading scheme. Almost done because I'm not going to talk much more about this stuff. Especially in the lab part of the course, don't be distracting. If so, I will blah, blah, blah in the beginning. I'll be expecting you to listen to me and ask questions. When it comes to the lab, this sort of last half hour, the sort of more lab portion of the course, if you want to put on headphones and or anything like that, that's perfectly fine by me. Pandemic stuff they make me put in. Don't cheat. I do get cheating in this course. I had a situation years back. I have all these in the homeworks. It is give me an example of this web element, this HTML element. And I had a guy who was Chinese, and so every page he made was about China, which was fine. And then I started getting other students' pages that were all about China, And I'm not stupid. So don't tempt me that much. Plus, I should also, I don't always say it anymore, so I used to say it a lot. People in this area often get jobs where they are working with data and they sometimes need security clearances if you want to work with the government, for instance, but also other places that in turn work with the government. And if you need a security clearance, those people come around and they ask a question. They don't say, did you absolutely positively catch them cheating? They ask the question like, do you have any reason to believe? So don't give me any reason to believe bad things about you. because I will tell them, because or I will tell you if I, sort of half think that you cheated. I will tell you to, that I won't write you a letter of recommendation, so don't ask. And even if you don't give them my name, the government ones, they come to campus. You never cheated for McCooey, so you give them McCooey's name, and then they'll ask McCooey, is there anybody else around who might know the student? And she'll give them my name, and they'll come, and then I'll have to say bad things. So don't give me bad things to say. All right, blah, blah, blah. Any questions on syllabus crap? Good. All right. So let's do a little HTML and see it in CSS and Java. Okay. So the first thing we got to start off with is just a button. And I want, I use a VS Code. If I'm going to work with that thing, it's overkill right now to work with a live server, but I will do it anyway. So I will open the folder. So I just downloaded that. So that should be in downloads. I'm just going to open the downloads folder as a folder. And then there's my button. That was my HTML file. And this is, again, it's not Visual Studio, but it's Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a free thing, so you don't need that Alliance or anything, or whatever the hell they're calling it now. This is just free to the world. So if you don't have it, get it. There are extensions here for that sort of live server thing. There it is. And this little gear says, I already have it. Yay me. Okay. So then if again, so I started by opening a folder. If I open the file rather than the folder, the live server is going to complain. So I have to have the live server, and then I have to open the folder, not the file. But then I have within Visual Studio Code, I'm now opened up to the file. There's my Explorer. So I open up the folder, then within the folder, I find the file. And if I right click on the file, I can open up in the live server. And this is just a simple little button interaction. So I have an alert, I'm changing the page, and I'm going to right click and inspect. And there's something called the console. And that little one down there is from my console. Here's button 2. There's the 2 on the console. I changed the page and my third button. So just 3 versions. And this is like what I was telling you when I was rattling on about the syllabus. I often teach you different levels of sophistication, and you can pick what level of sophistication you want to do it, so long as it works. Occasionally, I will specify. Like when we come to React, you'll have to use React. When it comes to Vue, we'll have to use Vue. When I'm doing classes and objects, I will say you have to use classes and objects. But if I don't say, then it's usually open. If it's not clear, ask. Okay. Here's the web page. If I'm in Visual Studio Code and I make a new file, so I went to File, New File, that makes a TXT file. But if I save that file, whatever.html. Now, by the extension, it understands it's HTML. And typically, hopefully this is going to work. If I hit exclamation point, it says, do you want this emit abbreviation? And it gives me, let me just enter. And then it gives me a boilerplate for a web page. There's a head and a body. There's an HTML tag. There's a head tag. There's a body tag. I often emphasize that there's nothing between the head and the body. There's no neck. Okay, so most of the stuff in the head you don't see. The one thing that you do see is the title, and that is on the tab. So this basic button on the tab, that came from the title. There is this meta tag here about the car set. There are lots of meta tags. This one is just about the car set. That's the character set. UTF-8 is sort of like normal characters. So if I were going to write a page that was going to be in Japanese or something, then I would choose a different character set. Visual Studio Code has this ability to collapse regions. So right now my style section is collapsed. Let me expand it. And then you can, now I have the body styling, that's collapsed. Let me expand that. So here's the styling of my body. That's the page. Here's my body color. It's maroon, which is that dark red. The color is DDDDDD. So that is a very light gray. Padding gives me a little space around things, and my font is Arial, which is a sans serif font. Div is a space on a page. Here's I give it a little bit, margin is a little bit space, a little bit different than padding. Padding sort of like internal space, whereas margin's more of an external space. And so I have some space above and below at the top margin and the bottom margin. Inline block, divs usually want to be on a line by themselves, but inline means they can be on a line with other things. And block means that I could, if I want, give them widths and such. The input in this case are the buttons, and I gave them a width, and I switched the colors around and made the font weight bold and gave them a little padding. So that's my style. Again, is that a good style? I have no idea. I don't care. I only teach you the syntax of. So body is the whole page. So there's no, there's a tag that's called body. So I'm styling a tag. There's a style, there are tags that are called div. There are tags that are called inputs, as we'll see as we get to the HTML. Here's the body tag. Here's a header. There is a header when you say H1, H2, H3, that is a sort of a visual header, and that will be, is the font going to be large, and so on. There's a different tag where header is spelled out, and that's what we call a semantic header. And there you're just logically saying the contents of this thing serve as the header of the page. So there are logical tags and there are styling. So how things look tags. So H1 is how things look. I will ask on a lot of my labs were old tests, so you'll get an idea what my tests will be like by looking at my labs. And I often say, have a header with, have a title. We saw the title, have a title with your name, and you'll get a point. And have a header with your name, and you'll get a point. If you put the header up in the title, it will work because the browser's nice, but I'm not. And so I'll take off some fraction of a point if you put the header up in the head. The header doesn't go in the head. The only visible thing, the only thing that you can see on the page in the head is the title, and that makes the tab. Everything else that you see on the page should be in the body. This is the body. The things that you can see on the body should be in the body. And this header is on the page. It's in the body, so it belongs in the body. Okay, here's my input. There are different types of input. This is a button input. And here I give it an ID, a button click, and I give it a value. That's what you see. On click, this is how it responds to the user. And here is the div and it also has an ID, so I can access it in code. And here's another button and another button. And these buttons don't have onclick. So I can say in the element itself how to connect to JavaScript, or I cannot have it here in HTML at all and do it all in JavaScript. All right. So here is my first button. This is my first button called handle button 1. So script announces that I'm starting my JavaScript. Here's handle button 1. Here's the message that popped up, alert. Here's the thing that popped over on the side on the console. Here's me changing the page. The div next to the button had an ID of div result 1, and I'm saying go to the page, get an element with this ID, and then inner HTML is between the open and the close tag, and make it say changing page from handle button 1. And then this is me going to the button and setting its disabled property to true, so the user can't click on it again. This is a function called by the body. Here on the body, I have an onLoad called handle page load. And that's me doing the opposite of what I just did here. So when they click the button, the last thing I did was disable the button. But if they're starting the page, the first thing I do is enable the button. My script, let me collapse my script for a second. My script is the last thing in my body. So when the web page is made, it sees all the HTML, and then I get to the script. I can put the script up at the top, but that's usually harder, because if I refer to the page and the page hasn't been made yet, it's going to say, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Okay. So this is me, because the script's at the bottom, I can say, go to the page, find the thing with an ID of button click 2, and enable it. And I'll do things like that. I will say in the test, enable the button. There's no enabled property in JavaScript. There's a disabled property which you set to false to enable something. So every once in a while, I'll have somebody, I'll say enable something, and they'll be trying to use an enabled property which doesn't exist. So what can I do? Some people don't pay attention. Here is me. If you remember on button 2, there was no onclick up there. Scrolling up, here's button 2. There's no onclick like there was in button 1. So here is me saying, go to the page, find the element with an ID, button click 2, and then listen for a click. So that says that something, we're making an interface. There are going to be events. That's what interfaces have. They have events. Listen for an event. What kind of event? Click. Associated with what element? Button click 2. And then that's going to be handled by some function. And now what I'm doing right now is what's called an anonymous function. I'm just sort of saying right away, okay, well, here's that function. So if you click a button 2, if you click it, here immediately is what I want you to do. So I don't name the function. I just immediately start giving you the function. Again, an alert, a console, change something on the page, disable a button. Okay. Version 3, again, enable the button 3. This is not in a function. So code that's not in a function gets executed right away. Code that's in a function has to be called. All right. I hope you know that from some previous coding course. Here is me saying, again, button 3 was like button 2. There was no on click. So here's me saying, go to the page, find the element with this ID and add a listener that is going to listen for clicks and then is going to go to a function called button handler 3. So this is a named function, whereas for button 2, it was an anonymous function. And so then I say function and I give my name, and then again, the alert, the console, the div, and the disabling of the button. Questions. 1, the code is there and commented for you to pull down and look at. 2, there is a pre-recording of me talking about this, and I will also post this recording. So if I go a little fast at some point, you're allowed to ask, interject with a question. I like questions, but if it was just, I think I understood it, but it was a little too fast, you can play back the recording. Hopefully nowhere near me because I hate the sound of my own voice. All right. Questions. All right. So that was buttons. 3 levels of sophistication. The last 2 were pretty much the same, just slightly different, whether it was an anonymous function or a named function. But this is sort of like more of a beginner approach, but it works. And then the addEventListener is a little more sophisticated. So let's look at the lab I have you doing. So I have there's one more thing to go over, the text input. I'm having you, what do you have to do? You're making this a gold chain estimator. So you're going to say, so we need to do some text input or some number input, say how long the chain is, how wide the chain is, what the caret of the chain is, click the button and estimate how much that gold chain costs. So that is the lab. So I showed you buttons. Let's now show you text. And there's text input 2. I closed everything. Let me open the folder again to documents. Probably was already open to documents, but open it again to documents. Go to the Explorer. Here's text input. Right click, open with live server. So there's a place for the user to put the name, Franz Mark, why not? And then click a button. And there's my alert. And I also have some console stuff over here. And I'm changing the page. So similar to my button, but I'm getting information now from the box. If I change what's in the box, I'm going to change it to different spelling of Mark. It clears out my page. So there's the click event, which we already know about. And then there's also events of this text input. That's this clearing. Again, so if I change what's here, Betty, it clears this. And these are both, this is the same. Just this will be the addEventListener again. So that same level of sophistication from here to here that we saw in the previous one will be here. And then here is a number instead of a name. So I'm typing away, if you can hear me typing away. And oh, and E popped in because E is a possibility of a number in JavaScript and in computers in general, because E is part of like a scientific notation, like a floating point number, or actually no, it's more the scientific notation. Uses an E. Instead of X times 10 to the raised to the power, it uses an E. So that's why, even though I specified it has to be a number, that's why it allowed me to type an E. All the other letters it didn't let me type because they're not part of a number. but I'm not going to use scientific notation to enter the number of hours I worked. I'm just going to say I worked 67 hours, and it's just saying that. And I also have the clearing. Now I'm working 69. And depending how the browser handles it, it often gives numerical inputs, this sort of up-down sort of feature. And that's also changes this result here. All right. And I'm not giving you any time today to work on the labs in the period, but that's not usual. Usually you have half an hour to work on the labs, but I used all that syllabus time up. There's a style. It's not much different than the other style. One thing probably, I had an input of the button type and an input of the text type. So previously, I only had, the only inputs I had were the buttons. So when I wanted to style the buttons, I just said input. Now I have two different kinds of input. And so within style, I can add this attribute and say, if the type is button, style it one way. If the type is text, style it a different way. Okay. So that was style. Collapse that. Label is a way to associate some text with something. So I'm saying this is the label for my text name 1, and then here's the input of my text name 1. So you don't have to do that. You could just write name here and that would look the same. But later on, we will see the purpose of a label. So the label right now isn't doing much for us. Then in later times, it will do more work for us when we get to radio buttons and checkboxes. But here's an input of the text type. So that's where the user can write. It's got an ID of text name 1. I don't have a value, but the value would be what's written in the box. So if I did have a value here, then I would be sort of pre-writing something in the box. That's different from, say, a hint. So there's an actual writing in the box, and then there could be a hint of something in the box. Those are two different things. The value is sort of what's really written in the box, and I didn't want anything written in the box in design. So I have no value thing here, or I could say value equals quote, quote. Here with the button, I had an on click. Here in the text input, I have an on input. Input is when what's in the box changes. That could be a keyboard event as me typing, and that could also be a mouse event of me sort of highlighting the thing and sort of maybe pasting something I had saved from someplace else. So both of those events count as inputs. And so this function handle text input is going to be called either way, then I change what's in the box. If I wanted to do something different when I typed from when I did something with the mouse, I can do that. There are multiple events, but this is sort of this simple standard event for this kind of input. For a text or number kind of input is just the on input event. And then here's the button, and I have for it an on click. Okay, so let's look at those two functions before I run out of time. Here's the handling of the button. When they handle, when the user clicks the button, I'm declaring a variable. I'm going to get the user typed in the box and get it as a variable and do something with it in code. So this is me declaring it. There's an older way in JavaScript of declaring it using var. I give you somewhere a homework that explains the difference between let and var. It's sort of a scope thing, that the more other languages have a more defined scope, that the variable only exists in a certain region where it makes sense for it to exist and have a certain value. And let sort of obeys the more modern scoping protocol, whereas var is sort of overly generous and can lead to sort of sometimes programming errors, especially if you're working in a team and different people doing different things. Okay, here is us this is an assignment statement, an equal. You should know that from a previous programming class. So this is me going to the page, document, get element by ID, text name, and getting the value. So I'm going to that text input. I'm grabbing its value, which is what's written in the box. Presumably the user's come along and written something. And I'm calling it the user input. I'm asking if they didn't type anything, then the user input would be quote, quote. And if that's the case, I'm going to alert. I'm going to pop something up. And I'm also going to return. I'm going to leave this function and not do anything else. Return basically means leave the function. So if they didn't enter anything, I'm going to yell at them and leave the function. If they typed something, even a space, then I'm going to say alert is the pop-up, hello. I'm going to console to pop over in the box to show that I was there. I'm going to go to the page, find the div result 1 element. It was a div. There was an open and a close. Inner HTML is what's between the open and close, and I'm writing the word hello and adding the user input to it. So hello, Fred, hello, Ginger, hello, whoever. This is me disabling the button like I did before. Here is the event of them, the input event, them changing something by some means, changing something in the text input. Here's me clearing out the div. So here was me writing in the div. Here's me clearing the div or putting a bunch of X's there. This was me disabling the button. This is me re-enabling the button. So if they change their answer, I'm going to change my display and then I'll let it become active again. Okay. Version 2 is just that more sophisticated way where I add a listener instead of having so there's no on click for the button, there's no on input for the text input. So it's more or less the same, except I'm taking the add listener approach. So this is me disabling the button, enabling the button when the page starts, clearing out any answer when the page starts. Here is me saying I'm going to have a click event for button 2, and I'm doing the named approach. Here's the name of the function. I'm going to have also have an event. I'm going to have a listener. I'm going to list for an input event of my text input. This shows one of the advantages of the named. So for the button, I had 2 approaches. I had the anonymous approach and the named approach. And one of the nice things about the named approach is it allows me to collect all my events. So I could, at the very top of my code, I could have all these event listeners. And then a person looking at my code at the top could say like, oh, here are all the events. So I could collect together all my elements and their events provided I work with the named function approach. If I work with the anonymous thing, then I got to put the code right away. So then these things sort of get separated. So it depends how you like to organize. It's not necessarily one's better than the other. It's a matter of how you like to organize. Let me uncollapse this. This is my handle button 2. It's the same as handle button 1. The difference was the add listener, nothing else. So we've seen this. Same thing for the clearing the box. Okay. The third one, sorry, I'm rushing, but I want you to be able to do the lab. What's different in the third one is that instead of it being of the text type, it's of the number type. Remember, I couldn't type any letters other than the E. I think I can also type a minus sign and maybe a period, because that they're also parts of numbers. Minus signs and periods are parts of numbers. So this is me saying it's an input of the number type. Here's its ID, text hours. I can put in a minimum and a maximum and a step. So that step determines when I use this up-down arrow, would I go up or down by? Okay. So the type had changed, nothing else really changed, although I can add the min, the max, and the step. I don't have to have the min, the max, and the step, but that gives me some sort of validation stuff. Like depending on the browser, if you put in a number that's lower than the min, it may display it. So what happens if I put in a minus 71? Is there any sign of it? Not really. What if I'm above? Sometimes you can get some validation error signaling if you're outside of the min or the max. All right. That was all 2. Here is 3. So here's me enabling the button when the page starts, clearing out any answer when the page starts, getting a click event for the button, getting an input event for the text hours. So that's all the same as number 2. Here's the get the user hours. Here's me getting the hours from the page. That's the normal stuff that I did for above. But here's a new numbery thing. Even though I said that the box was of the number type and what you get out of it is a number, when you bring it over here into JavaScript, JavaScript's going to think it's text. So if you want to insist that it's a number and announce to JavaScript that this is a number, you use words like parse float or parse int. So I'm presuming that they can have, 35 and a half hours. So they can have fractional parts. So I'm parsing it as a float here. If I parse it as an int, it would probably round it for me, or maybe truncate it. I'd have to examine what it does, but okay. But I'm allowing fractional parts, so I said parse float. Up here, when they didn't do anything, I asked if it was equal to quote, quote, then I yelled. But down here, now that I've done parse float, I switch and I use an is NaN. So if they didn't type anything, or maybe they typed E or something that was part of a number, but not on its own a number, this is my way to find that error. So so this will take like a blank, a quote, quote, and there's especially with floats, there's a float, which is not a number, but it is a float. So then it makes something, so it's no longer quote, quote, it's a float called NaN, and then we have to ask, not is it quote, quote, but is it NaN? So that is a switch in our question when we're dealing with numbers. So if they didn't enter anything proper as a number, I yell and get out. If they entered a negative number, I yell and get out. If they entered too big of a number, I yell and get out. And if I get all the way down here, that means they entered a number and it was within my range. And then I'm alerting it. I didn't do any console there. And displaying it on the page and disabling the button. But the big thing was this numbery part. So 146 is a change because it's a number, and 148 is a change because it's a number. And your lab was dealing with numbers, so you got to do some of that. So that's why I rushed and got to it. And still, I have this document get down here that's just doesn't belong there. So I started to do something and then stopped it. All right. So those are my examples. The homework is just watch some little videos to do a quick HTML page, a quick CSS page, a quick JavaScript page. Some people will make it 3 separate things. Some people will put them all into one. I don't care. Just make it clear to me if you combine them that they're combined. It's usually clear to me if you don't combine them what I'm supposed to be looking at, but it's not always clear to me when you combine them that I'm looking at some combined thing. So if you combine them, give me a heads up in your email or on the page itself. And in the lab, we saw you're doing that gold chain thing. I'm done rattling on. This is not normal. Usually you have half an hour to work. Now, right now you only have 3 minutes to work. It's not due for a week. Don't worry about it. But are there any questions? All right, then I will stop recording and say goodbye.